There you'll find a complete searchable record of speeches, interviews, and other events related to the November elections. You can search campaign footage by keyword, candidate, state, or party, as well as view any program in its entirety. That's cspan.org/campaign2000. Next, the Missouri Senate debate. Yesterday, incumbent Republican Senator John Ashcroft and his challenger, Democratic Governor Mel Carnahan, met in Kansas City, Missouri to debate the issues. It comes to us courtesy of KCPT TV and lasts about an hour.
Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, have a seat. Before we begin the questions, let me introduce the candidates. The Democratic nominee is Missouri Governor Mel Carnahan. He is wrapping up his second term in that office. Governor Carnahan previously served in the Missouri House of Representatives. He is a former state treasurer and lieutenant governor. He is from Rolla, Missouri. The Republican nominee is incumbent United States Senator John Ashcroft. He served 2 terms as Missouri governor before being elected to Washington in 1994. He is a former state auditor and attorney general. Senator Ashcroft is from Springfield, Missouri. Nick?
Gentlemen, welcome to Kansas City, and you've been gracious enough to agree to dispose of all opening and closing statements tonight so we can hear more of the questions from the citizens of Missouri. The first question comes from Richard Zorick, who is a school bus driver from Independence.
Okay. I keep hearing ads and election coverage on that they're trying to reach Republicans or reach the Democrats and reach the independents and the undecided. And I'm part of a demographic that's probably larger than all of those together, and I'm a non-voter, and I have been for the last few elections. And I've come to that conclusion that it doesn't do any good to vote because whoever wins, we seem to get messed up anyway. I mean, that's a very common sentiment. I am a registered voter, and I would like a reason to become a voter. Can you give me 3 reasons why I should vote for you?
Senator Ashcroft.
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, and thanks to KCP-TV, and thanks to the League of Women Voters, and to all of you for expressing an interest. I'm grateful for this inquiry. It's important to us. We do need to inspire broader participation. Democracy is the business of free people exercising that freedom to make good decisions. And to that end, I think we need a debate worthy of the people of Missouri. So I want you to know that in this debate, I'll respect my opponent. I'll call him Governor Carnahan because I respect him in his office. I won't interrupt him. I may challenge some of his positions, but I won't have personal attacks. I think if we want to bring more people into the process, we need to have a process that's worthy of great Missouri values and inspiration. It's Missouri values that I took to Washington, D.C. to do some things that I think were very important, and I think things that are important to you and to your family and to the families with whom you live. When I went to Washington in 1994, we had a horrendous debt. We decided to pay down the national debt. When I went to Washington, we needed not only to pay down the debt, we needed to balance the budget. We needed to protect Social Security. And we've done that. And my plan for the next term is to build on that prosperity which we're enjoying for the future. I'll have a $200 billion trust fund for classrooms. I'll continue to protect Social Security. We'll pay off the publicly held debt of the United States of America in the next decade. That's very important. And we'll have taxes that reflect the values of the people of Missouri. I think those are important things.
Thank you, Senator Ashcroft. Governor Carnahan.
Well, thank you, Richard, for that question, and thank you to Kansas City Public Television and for all of you for participating in this very important debate. It has been a pleasure to serve as your governor, and we've accomplished a lot, and all families, I believe, are better off. And Richard, that gets back to your question about whether it matters who you vote for, because we have made remarkable progress in the last 8 years. Families have more income, unemployment is down, education, student scores are up, and violent crime is down. And so we believe that there's a lot more yet to do. and that's why I want to go to the Senate. My priority there would be to protect Social Security first with the surplus, and Medicare, and put a prescription drug benefit in Medicare. And yes, I agree with my opponent, we would pay down the national debt, only I put it in a higher priority. And then we'd give tax cuts to middle-income people. That's where I think the tax cuts ought to be. But my opponent has proposed a $4 trillion tax cut that would make all those things impossible. It would use Social Security, it would cut Medicare, and it would make it impossible to make improvements to education. So to answer your question, I would protect Social Security first, I would support a prescription drug benefit under Medicare, and I would pass a real Patients' Bill of Rights. And if we had had a person in the Senate now who believed that, we'd have those protections today.
Thank you, Governor Carnahan. Mr. Zorek, did they answer your question?
I guess my disenchantment with the elections and the coverage that I hear is probably, with all due respect, with some of what I just heard now. I'm an average working person, and I struggle. You know, you struggle with the mortgages, you struggle with the car payments, you struggle with this and that, medical bills, and when you pass legislation or anything up on this level, by the time it gets down to my level, we're screwed with, you know, with all due respect. And that's what I want to hear. You know, I hear what you say, but I'd rather hear it in different terms, easier understood terms.
You still have another 30 seconds, Senator Ashcroft, if you can still satisfy this one citizen of Missouri.
Well, I sure hope that by addressing your needs as a taxpayer, for instance, giving you more money to spend on your own instead of having government spend it for you. That would be important to you. Sending school resources back to the local district instead of sending those resources to the bureaucracy in Washington. I think people who know the names of the students and the needs of the school can make better decisions than bureaucrats can. I would think that paying down the debt so that in the future so much of government isn't consumed in making interest payments so you can be relieved of the cost of government. I hope those things are important to you, and I believe they are to every family, working families in particular.
Thank you very much. Governor Carnahan.
Richard, to put it in terms right where people live, during the time that I have been governor, we have worked to be sure that you could keep more of the money, and persons in Missouri on average have $4,000 more of disposable income after taxes than they did 8 years before. I want to help with the Patients' Bill of Rights so that when you have medical problems, you and your doctor can make those decisions. And yes, I will emphasize middle income tax cuts as opposed to tax cuts for the very wealthy that some would propose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question for Governor Carnahan. Governor, Brenda Collins works at a local hospital, and of course, question to you and to Senator Ashcroft as well. Brenda?
Yes, my concern is with the female working poor. Recently, there was a study that was published here in Kansas City that showed that these females left welfare and went to work. But the wages that they were faced with only averaged out to $5 to $6 per hour. They have families, they have bills to deal with, they have transportation needs, and they also have child care. These wages are not livable wages. I would like to know how you could assist these women to become economically self-sufficient, because this was the purpose of the Welfare Reform Act. It did decrease the government assistance for them, which means they moved on, but right now they still are in need of cash assistance, and they are having a very hard time. I'd like to know how you can assist them to become economically self-sufficient.
All right, Governor.
Brenda, that's a very good question, and I think that we are aware that women generally do not receive wages on a par with men, and I favor requiring the payment of women the same as we pay men. I think that's a form of discrimination that I'm opposed to, and I favor measures to move us in that direction. And I have led state government in that direction as well. We have employed more women at higher levels, at both the middle income and the high income. And we work to do that because we're trying to solve the inequity. And so in many ways, we've worked on it. The other is that I favor the raising of the minimum wage. That's a place where my opponent and I differ. I favor raising that minimum wage. He does not. That and several other steps along that line will be what will help us to really get the equity where it ought to be.
Senator?
the key to making a salary that will be survivable, and I think that's the really important thing you're talking about. Not too long ago, I had the privilege of working alongside some folks in the faultless laundry here, because one of the things I do when I return from Washington is to take a job to get an idea how people are doing. And I think education is the key here. And when we provide more resources for training and we provide better fundamental resources for education, that's when people have the ability to work their way up. When I talked to the employers there and the people that I was working with at Faultless, they told me they had quite a bit of turnover. And when we had velocity in the economy, people could come in at a beginning position and then move up the ladder. I think if we have the right kind of educational support for individuals wanting to move up the ladder, that's where we make the difference. And I think that's the key to the right kind of help with child care, the right kind of help with education, so that these people, very frequently talented individuals who need just a little bump in terms of their own capacity, those are very important things. So the education thing is very important, the training thing, the kind of mobility, the right component of child care in the equation, that's very important. Helping people with health care as they move from welfare to work has also been an important thing, because sometimes when you figure the entire package of benefits that people get, they had a bigger or better package on welfare than they had in the employment situation. But ultimately, our effort has to be to move those people from welfare to work. I think we all agree on that, and it's especially important for the children, because we need them to be children of working families, trained in work rather than trained in dependence.
Senator, thank you. Brenda, did that address? Obviously, you have some concerns about how welfare reform has worked. Is that accurate? Did you get the answer you wanted to hear, or would you like to follow?
Not necessarily, because these are answers that this has already reached the point where you are talking about right now. The people that I'm talking about would like to go to the educational courses. They would like to obtain the training, but their problem lies within their transportation. Because they left welfare and went to work, and because of these minimum wages, they are not able to afford child care. They cannot afford adequate transportation. Most of them are preyed upon by the finance agencies here for the second chance, and not to say anything against anyone, but that's where they go. And the means of transportation are almost broken down. They're having a very hard time getting to and from. We need to address that issue. I'd like to know how you would address that. They need assistance with this. They really need to get this. They want the training. They want the education.
Brenda, thanks. Governor, 30 seconds to talk about the working poor.
Brenda, your concerns I do understand, and as we did welfare reform in Missouri, we made sure that it was not some penal thing, but we did it in a way that was constructive. And we did provide training, we did provide child care, we did provide medical care, and we did provide transportation. Now, none of those, I hear you loud and clear, none of those are adequate. But we are moving in that direction. We did not do a punitive welfare reform, and we need more training to let you get a better job and to move on up and to have better services in these other categories.
Thank you. Senator, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think we're on the right track here. One of the keys in welfare reform at the federal level was to leave states and local communities with the ability to deploy or to assign resources to get the job done with what's needed. When the federal government had been dictating the entire process some time ago, they were specifying that it had to be this way or that way, and none of the flexibility that was appropriate. And a lot of states have made a lot of progress, reducing roles substantially because they've had the flexibility to say, our need here is in transportation, let's get the transportation done, or our need here is in training, let's focus on training.
Thank you, Senator. Nick?
We go now to Joey Skidmore, who's a Kansas City area musician.
Hey, everybody's talking about welfare reform and everything, but taking it one step further in more general terms, since this is being held at the historic Gym Theater, which has always featured black entertainers, black musicians, but once had a segregated audience, both of you have been governor. What have each of you done to support race relations, hire, promote, appoint, and support African Americans and other minorities while you were governor?
We begin with Senator Ashcroft.
I'm delighted, thank you. I think you really touch an important issue in our culture, that the word community is a word that ends in the word unity. The last 5 letters are the most important of that, and building a sense of community is what America's all about. While I was governor, I had a number of privileges, and among those to do things that would support the integration of our community and also the development of unity in the community. I was the governor that signed into law the Martin Luther King holiday. That had been a sticking point for our legislature. I wanted to be able to do that. I created an award for all students in the state who did well called the George Washington Carver Award. I wanted all students to have a role model that was a role model of color, not just the typical role models we had had. I appointed the first black judge to the Western District Court of Appeals. Never before had there been one before I appointed Judge Gaitan to this court, who was then soon elevated to the United States District Court. So those are the kinds of things that I wanted to do and to have an opportunity to do. I think education is an important thing, and when Lincoln University was on the rocks financially and people in the legislature were considering shutting it down, and you all know about Lincoln University. It was a university started in Jefferson City with Civil War veterans, a historically black school with a great heritage that we shouldn't lose in the state. I went to bat and kept that university open. I think we need to make sure that we give people equal opportunity and that we make sure everyone knows about the opportunity so that we're aggressive in making sure that when there are jobs or other things that are available, everyone participates with an equal shot.
Thank you, Senator Ashcroft. Governor Carnahan.
Was it Joe? Is that the name? Joe, is a very good question about what we've done and what is our commitment to diversity and inclusion. It is a code of mine that we work toward that. It's a goal where we must do a lot better. In my appointments and employments as governor, I have reached out to include many, many more minorities and women, and we've raised the ratios considerably. We also have worked on some other issues. We passed in Missouri a hate crimes law because we thought that it was very, very improper to have these things that were directed to because of someone's race or the color of the skin. And if that crime is committed in that way, there should be an extra penalty. There's a bill pending in the Congress along this line, and I support that bill. My opponent opposes it. We also passed a racial profiling bill in Missouri because we think that it is just absolutely abhorrent that someone would be hassled or stopped for no reason except for their ethnicity, the color of their skin. And we passed a very good racial profiling bill in Missouri. One has a reporting requirement that helps us to cure the problem by getting training to police officers and others who deal with these issues. There's a bill like that pending in Congress as well, and I favor enactment, and you can ask my opponent what his position is on that.
And he has that opportunity right now, Senator Ashcroft.
You know, I'm delighted to have the opportunity. I think for anybody to be singled out based on race is simply wrong. I'm pleased that the governor signed a hate crimes bill in the state of Missouri, because when I was governor, I signed the first hate crimes bill that we had in the state of Missouri, and we've all been working to try and eliminate these kinds of things. I just would mention in the 10 seconds that are left, I want to introduce my wife, Janet. She's with me here. She teaches school. I used to teach school. She teaches at Howard University, one of the great traditionally black research institutions of America, and has taught there for the last 5 years. Our family's been working hard to build bridges, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Senator Ashcroft. And Governor Carnahan, would you like to introduce your wife in these 30 seconds?
My wife Jean and my daughter Robin and my son Randy are here, and we're good. That's part of my good family support. Thank you.
My wife is watching at home tonight, I hope. So. I hope. We'll get back to the questions in just a minute, gentlemen. But first, we've gone out into the community as well to try and get some comments throughout the year in our partnership with Channel 19 to try and reach the voters who may be undecided, a little upset with the process. We call it Speaker's Corner. And we're going to play a tape for you now. Governor Carnahan, you'll have the first question. So if you'll turn, it'll be on the monitor, and we can, and then both candidates can address it. Here's Speaker's Corner.
I would like for the candidates to see that every American citizen, whether they were employed or not, have health care coverage, because it's really created a problem if you're not employed and you don't have health care and you cannot see a doctor. You have to go to the public places. Sometimes you can't get in. Sometimes you have a problem seeing the same doctor every time you go. And it really has created a problem. It would be great if we could have health care coverage for everyone.
Health care coverage, Governor?
Well, I would be happy to comment on Ms. Free's question and her desire for health care coverage, and I think we all want to move toward a day when everyone will have health care coverage. I'm pleased to tell you that we are one of the few states in Missouri that has reached out and is covering more people with health care coverage than were before. There are very few states that are gaining in this area. Now, we still have a long way to go. The reason we gained was because we implemented the Children's Health Initiative program in a very aggressive manner, and we have covered over 90,000 uninsured children. Because we reached them, the number of insured people in Missouri is at an all-time high and also an all-time percentage, and it is gaining. But that's not enough. We've also got to reach out to try to get other populations and get them covered with health care. It's very important to do children, but we've got to get others as well, and I will be on that issue when I go to the United States Senate. It's something that I care deeply about, and it's an area where I know in this prosperous country that we have, we can do a better job of providing health care than we're now doing.
Senator.
Well, I would commend the governor for what he's done in the children's health arena, in the children's health care program. When we passed the legislation through the Congress, we were going to rely on people who would take an aggressive approach to get this done, and I think Governor Carnahan deserves our thanks because Missouri has been one of the leaders and recognized nationally for taking what we did in the Congress and voted to provide for states and implementing it in the state. And so I would say that that's an important thing. We do need for people to have the right kind of health care and to be able to get it and get it fairly. That's one of the reasons I joined with John McCain and Democrats and Republicans in a Patients' Bill of Rights to make sure that people are treated fairly and that if HMOs abuse individuals, they have a right not only to health care but to recover for damages. I'm pleased that the American Medical Association has endorsed that measure, which we have joined together to work on. And I think for people who need health care, they need to be able to get it. And when they get it, they ought to be treated fairly and making sure that they have that opportunity. I would add that I think it's time for our government to say to people, if you are making payments for health care, that you can deduct those from your taxes. Right now, we've got this whole system skewed toward if you don't have a job or if your employer's not providing for it, you get taxed first on the money and then you have to pay for your health care. Let's make health care tax deductible, make it tax-free, so we can give more people the opportunity to enjoy the kind of coverage that all of us believe that we all need.
Governor?
Well, I also would support a Patients' Bill of Rights, and we have a lot of credibility in Missouri because we passed a strong bill. But when my opponent had the opportunity to vote for such a bill, he voted no. The bill that he voted for is one that the American Medical Association called a sham. Many of us say it was the HMO Bill of Rights. It was the one that protected them, not patients. So we really should get at this business. We need a Patients' Bill of Rights. We need to get to some reforms, but we need a real one that will really serve the interests of patients.
Senator?
I'm pleased that the AMA on its own motion last week took out a 3/4-page ad in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and said we commend Senator Ashcroft as a courageous senator who is willing to stand up to the HMOs and to negotiate a Patients' Bill of Rights that the AMA says is in the interest of patients. When the AMA simply said that Senator Ashcroft has put patients above politics and has put patients above the insurance companies, I was grateful for that endorsement, and I'm pleased to be a part of the measure which they have endorsed and said that we ought to pass.
All right, Senator, thank you. Next question for you, and again, we'll use Speaker's Corner. Watch your monitor for the question from a member of the electorate.
I'm concerned about the candidates bad-mouthing one another. They say what they're going to do, but they don't really do it. I think it's about time that they got off of their duffs and started doing what they keep promising they'll do.
We chuckle, of course, but that's a very serious statement, is it not, Senator?
Yes, it is.
You know, I watch TV ads for a living as a reporter, and the concern and sometimes disgust among members of the electorate is really profound about how these exchanges take place. What can you and your opponent do about it?
Well, you know, frankly, I bet you all have felt that way at least once or twice, and if you won't admit it, you probably, well, anyhow, I'll admit it. He said two things. He made a comment about campaigning and then said, get off our duff and do what we promised to do. And I listened carefully, and I think that's good advice. That's one of the reasons I haven't been happy with the tone of this campaign, so I've tried to elevate it and say that I want to treat my opponent with respect. And I think we ought to be, we ought to be able to talk about our positions. We ought to be able to talk with facts about one thing or another, but we should treat each other with dignity and respect. I think the people deserve that. But the people deserve for us to do what we said we would do. And if you could run my commercials from 1994, there would be three main themes in those commercials. The first was balance the budget. Before we could do a lot of the other things we needed to do in our household, we needed to get the budget under control. That's like at home. Secondly, we needed to begin to pay down the debt instead of going deeper into debt, just like you do at home. Thirdly, we needed to be able to begin to correct the welfare system, but last but not least, stop spending the Social Security surplus that would jeopardize not only the future retirement, but the health care of individuals. I'm pleased to tell you we've balanced the budget. We've started to pay down the debt instead of go deeper into debt. We're doing it successfully. We have stopped with the Ashcroft rule in the Senate. It was on my motion. We haven't spent a dime of the Social Security surplus since that rule was embraced. These are the kinds of progress. We've reformed welfare. I think these are the kinds of things. Washington has changed its way of doing business, and I think that's really what he was talking about.
Thank you, Senator. Governor, the gentleman suggested that we're bad-mouthing each other in this race. Is that accurate, and if so, why?
Well, certainly there are a lot of negative ads that I've seen. I have the common experience of meeting people in the campaign, and they say, you look a lot better than you do on TV. And it's really not much of a compliment because they've been seeing me through this fisheye lens where I've been distorted. And so, yes, that is taking place, and I think that's inappropriate. I think we ought to focus on the issues, what we've done. I think people can tell more from what we've done than what we say in the heat of a political campaign, what we promised in that time. And I have very much tried to get the issues out, both about what my record is, and we point out what my opponent's record is. And one of those is a matter he talked about with Social Security. And the questioner said, why don't you do something and not just talk about it? My opponent has talked about a lockbox to protect Social Security. A good idea, a very good idea. But he's also proposed a $4 trillion tax cut that spends the Social Security Trust Fund. So there's no money in the lockbox. It's as though he's drilled a hole in the back and he has a lockbox with no money in it. And so that's the difference, and that's what this questioner is talking about. He's talking about the fact that we shouldn't just talk about a lockbox, this is going to protect it forever, when there are other proposals that take all the money out, and so the lockbox is not as secure as he would have you say.
Thank you, Governor. 30 seconds, Senator, to address that or other issues on campaign.
Well, of course. I am the author of the lockbox in the Senate. It's been embraced by the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the Senate, and the House. It is the mechanism by which we have protected every dime of the Social Security surplus for the last couple of years. And if the governor of Missouri doesn't support that lockbox, he's kind of rare, because this is a concept which is generally accepted in the country now. And my plan for the next term is not to do anything to infringe Social Security in any way. And I have never proposed any plan that would infringe the security of Social Security.
Thank you, Senator. Governor, 30 seconds if you choose.
Well, in a press conference a couple of years ago, when there was only a Social Security trust surplus, only a Social Security, my opponent proposed tax cuts for the wealthy, spending all of the Social Security money. And he was challenged in the press conference to say, but Senator, why shouldn't we save Social Security with this surplus? And he said, my priority is tax cuts. We'll do Social Security some other way. So he has proposed spending the Social Security Trust Fund with his New Beginnings plan, and even when challenged in a press conference, that was his position.
All right, Governor, thank you. Nick?
Our next question comes from Patricia Shelby, who's a sales manager.
Thank you. I have put two children, currently my baby son is a junior in the Kansas City, Missouri School District. My oldest son left the district several years ago. It has been a complete nightmare. It's a local level, and I know it's a local problem, but I know that the issue of vouchers is something that could probably be discussed at a national level. And I'd like to find out, if not for myself, or before some of my nieces and nephews that are going to be the future students, I'd like to find out what your views are on the vouchers.
And we'll start with Governor Carnahan.
Tricia, it's a very good question, and I sympathize with you and the difficulties that you've had with your children in the schools. The senator has worked with the problem when he was governor, and I have worked with the problem from the state level when I was governor as well. And I set out immediately to solve the lawsuit and get back to local control, get back to standards. For many years, these schools were run under a federal court order with no standards of performance. And that's what you suffered under, and that's what you want out from, and that's what people want out from under. And we have now got them back where they're under local control, and we have the state standards, and we're judging them. And by the way, they're not coming out very well on the judgment. But I don't think anybody believes they just now got bad. We just now have the standards and the judgment. So, but I do not approve of vouchers. I have approved charter schools under public supervision, and we have those available in Kansas City and St. Louis with these big, where these big lawsuits were settled. But I think we're on the way to turning it around where we can get quality education. We've got to have quality schools every place, and in particular, we've got to have quality schools in Kansas City and St. Louis. And I think by having standards, knowing what we have to do to bring them up, I think we're on the way. I do not approve of vouchers. I think that diverts money from public schools. That would permit a few to go to a private school, but would not increase the quality of public education.
Senator Ashcroft.
We have about 80,000 students trapped in failing schools in Missouri. We have the third highest number of failing schools of any state in the nation. And my heart goes out to students that are asked to succeed when the school is failing. It'd be like asking a sailor to swim if the ship were sinking. It's very difficult. And we need to do everything we can to help schools. That's one of the reasons I've said that I want to take 11% of the surplus at the national level, $200 billion over a 10-year period, and send it back to schools. And schools that are failing, I want to require that they spend that on basics, recruiting, retaining, and rewarding the best teachers, and then providing incentives to students so that they have an incentive to get an extra big college scholarship called the Pell Grant. I think that's the way for us to approach this. We really need to make sure that we do what's right. Now, should you have vouchers or shouldn't you? What I will say is the federal government has no business telling states whether or not they should have vouchers. We don't need bureaucrats in Washington saying to people in Missouri, you should have a voucher system. That's a decision that ought to be reserved to people at the state level to make that decision. How are we going to best have education? You know, when I was governor, we passed the Excellence in Education Act with the first statewide tests that could be compared one district to another. And then we moved on to additional measurements. And you really do need to know how the district is doing compared to other districts. Someone said the worst thing would be if you learned that your child was in a failing district. Well, it would be terrible if you didn't learn and your child was in a failing district. So we've got a lot of work to do together.
Thank you, Senator Ashcroft. Are you satisfied with the answers, Patricia?
Yes, I am very satisfied.
Governor Carnahan, well done. You have 30 seconds for a summary, if you so wish.
Well, I'm pleased that the senator has a plan for federal funds to help local schools, because I have such a plan. And I want to be sure that we take a new commitment to improving classroom instruction, and that we want the federal government to help, but to help through the local school district, keeping local control. In the past, my opponent has voted against the appropriations for public education every time he voted when he was in the Senate until after I was in the race against him. And so I think, and on vouchers, he says he doesn't want to take a position, but he voted for vouchers for the District of Columbia, something Congress controls.
Senator Ashcroft.
I'm very pleased that when we look at the surplus, that we have the ability to take a pretty substantial sum, $200 billion over a 10-year period, and direct it through local schools to help them achieve. That's very, very important. Now, I'm committed to taking a pretty substantial sum. The governor has made a a suggestion that it would be $50 billion that would help in the local schools. I want $200 billion that goes to local schools, so when people who know the needs of the school, the names of the students, they can decide, do we do lower class sizes? Do we enhance teacher quality some way? Do we need additional laboratory equipment? Local decisions to improve and upgrade what happens to students in classrooms.
Thank you, Senator Ashcroft. Dave.
With Bobby Campbell with the next question, it goes to Senator Ashcroft. Bobby?
Yes, the American people have no input in the one-man, one-vote system. It seems that corporations and special interests pay for everything, including our politicians and the laws that are passed in Congress. I would like to know if the candidates of Missouri would allow voluntary money from the massive, funds that you have to be to receive, if they would limit that, to receive limited taxpayer money in order to fund your campaigns. What do you think of Proposition B?
Senator, about a $10 million race, this one is. Talk a little bit about campaign finance, if you could.
Well, I'm in favor of campaign finance reform. There are a number of things that we ought to do. I think we ought to have immediate and total disclosure when gifts are received by individuals. We ought to make sure there aren't foreign contributions in the race, and we shouldn't have any contributions made to political campaigns that aren't voluntary. I want to go directly. And of course, I believe that one of the things we need to do to promote the independence of candidates is to do what the people of Missouri have asked for, and that's term limits. So I've committed that I would not serve more than 2 terms in the United States Senate if the people of Missouri give me the opportunity, and I don't want to presume on their votes, but I hope to have the opportunity for a 2nd term. Now, I really believe that for us to take tax dollars and run political campaigns with tax dollars is to make unwilling contributors out of the hardworking people of the country. And I'm not in favor of saying to people who don't approve of either of the candidates, whether you approve of these candidates or not, we're going to take money that you would otherwise have to spend on your family, and we're going to give it to them so they can buy TV ads that make you mad, or whatever else they might do. So I don't favor a system of public finance. I do favor campaign reform. I favor term limits. I favor immediate disclosure of all contributions, and that's something we can certainly do with the internet now. As a matter of fact, most candidates know this information as soon as it happens because we have to keep our records on computers, and our ability to put that up and post it on the net, for example, would at least give full disclosure and show the disclosure to everybody.
All right, Senator, thank you. Governor, a lot of money in this race, $1 billion in TV ads across the country. What can we do to limit that influence, if anything?
Bobby, a very good question, and there is too much money spent in the campaigns, and we need to reduce the influence of money on these campaigns, and that's what you're getting at entirely. We do need campaign finance reform, and I support the McCain-Feingold bill at the federal level. My opponent does not support that, and that would do many things, but one thing it would do would ban the so-called soft money. That's a loophole where corporations and individuals can give to committees, not your direct campaign committee, but one right beside it, unlimited amounts of money, and it pays for a lot of the ads that you see. I wanted to ban soft money in our campaign, and we could have done it in our campaign, and I challenged my opponent. We don't have to pass a law. We could just agree that soft money will be out of this particular U.S. Senate race. And my opponent would not agree, did not want to even discuss it. As to Proposition B, I have some difficulty with the way it is written because it is financed with a tax that I just cut. It was one of the tax cuts that we cut. We've cut $311 million of taxes, and it is financed by a means that I did not approve. But I do approve a system where we would let voluntary contributions go into a fund. The fund would be available to candidates, and if you took the money, you would be limited in how much you could spend.
Bobby, your reaction to what you heard there, obviously a concern, finance?
Yes, it is. I mean, it still seems that both of them want big campaign expenditures from corporations and whatnot.
There's a lot of corporations in both of those races, aren't there?
Yes.
Senator, 30 seconds.
Well, I certainly have some of that kind of money being spent for me, not as much as my opponent has had spent in his behalf. But the point that I would make is that
quiet, please.
The point that I would make is that soft money is a right now of people to spend, and they can spend it whether you agree to ban it or not. And so it is a right that people have to express themselves in our society. So to say that I could make an agreement with someone and forbid soft money, I can't make an agreement that keeps you from talking about the campaign or anyone else. Now, we might pass a law to that effect, and with the right balance in the law, I'm for it. But I tell you what, an agreement simply just is not something I have the authority to do.
Governor?
Well, I think we hear some amazing things in these debates, but we clearly could have agreed not to have soft money in our campaign. No question about it. It's a loophole in the federal law, and we could have agreed not to use it. Now, he's confusing with independent expenditures. That's something different, but we talk this lingo that every layperson doesn't talk, but the soft money that's in these committees that is helping us in our campaigns, running these commercials, we could have absolutely stopped it by an agreement between the two of us. You saw Hillary and Lazio, they did it in New York.
Thank you, Governor. Nick?
Our next question comes from Jim Aldrich, who's a retired limousine driver. Jim?
Yes, gentlemen, you've been on the campaign trail for some time now, and tonight you've been answering a number of questions. What I would like you to consider is what really burning question each of you would like to ask of the other, and then take turns. Maybe you could flip a coin or arm wrestle.
Well, Governor Carnahan would have answered this question first. Would you like Governor Carnahan to offer a burning question you've always wanted to ask of Senator Ashcroft?
Just figuring out which one might be the...
You mean besides the fisheye lens pictures, I guess that's what you're talking about. Well, I would like to know how the senator would propose to do his $4 trillion tax cut and not spend Social Security money and not have a $417 billion cut in Medicare, which is in the fine print of the plan, and how, after he did that, there would be any room to do anything for education, do anything for prescription drugs.
Senator Ashcroft, you have 90 seconds to do all that.
You know, am I supposed to answer his question or tell about the burning question I have for him?
You have to answer that question for 90 seconds, and you get
well,
your own
I'm not interested
question.
in cross-examining him. You know, the $4 trillion tax program is not a current program. It's not my plan for my next term in the Senate. Let me tell you what my next term's plan is for the Senate. It's a $200 billion trust fund for classrooms. Money not to be spent in bureaucracies in Washington, money not to be spent in bureaucracies in Jefferson City or the school district. Go to classrooms. Number two, it's to secure Social Security and Medicare. I'm the author of the Social Security lockbox. It's a durable lockbox. Not one dime of Social Security has been spent since the Ashcroft plan was adopted, and I was delighted when Vice President Gore embraced the Medicare lockbox this June. I had proposed it last November, and when he and the President put their arms around it, we passed it through the Senate right away. I want to pay down the debt, the national debt, the publicly held debt of this country should be paid off in the next decade. That's important for us to do. And some tax relief, like abandoning the marriage penalty in the tax code. I see no reason why, if the librarian and the deputy sheriff want to get married, they should have to pay $1,400 or $1,500 or $1,800 a year more just because they're married. Now, I was twice the sponsor of legislation that would do away with the marriage penalty in the tax law. The President of the United States vetoed it because he wanted to spend the money instead of give it back to people. And unfortunately, Governor Carnahan supported that veto. I think it's time for us to say that marriage is not only okay, but it's something we want to support in this culture.
Senator Ashcroft, you do have that opportunity to ask a burning question. Would you like to avail yourself of that opportunity?
No, I don't think I want to cross-examine my opponent. I think we know where he stands on the issues. And I think a good debate is fair, but I'm not interested in interrogating him.
Do you have any more response to that, Governor Carnahan, before we move on?
No response.
Dave Helen.
All right, thank you very much. I'm standing over here now with Roger Hyatt. Roger, you have a question for Senator Ashcroft.
Yes, we live, my question pertains to our role in the world rather than to the domestic issues that we've spoken a lot about this evening. We live in an increasingly shrinking and interdependent world where approximately 25% now of our gross national product depends upon placement of our goods and services in the international marketplace. Of course, as a U.S. Senator, you play an integral role in the formation of our foreign policy. My specific question deals with the U.S. embargo of Cuba, which we've had for approximately 40 years, without any real discernible positive effect. We have recently attempted to expand that embargo to punish foreign businesses doing business with Cuba. Again, the only discernible effect of that has been a clear statement from our major trading partners that they intend to take punitive measures against our businesses if indeed we take punitive measures against their businesses. My question is this: do you favor continuation of the U.S. embargo of Cuba? And if so, why? And if you do not favor it, what alternative suggestion do you have for dealing with Cuba?
Senator Ashcroft.
Well, I thank you very much for the question. This has been a matter of deep concern to me. You say that we really need to export a lot of our productivity. That's particularly true when it comes to agriculture. You know, soybean producers in this country produce twice as many soybeans as we can eat, and I'm eating all of them that I can. And so I have been the sponsor of legislation to end all food and medicine embargoes around the world that the president has unilaterally imposed. It's been an incredible effort to try and get this through. But I think that we'll vote, and I would predict we'll vote on Wednesday morning about 11 o'clock, because I think that's when it's scheduled on the Agricultural Appropriations Bill, to end food and medicine embargoes, at least that much of the embargo. At least we should say to the people of the world that the people of the United States do not want you in ill health, and we don't want you to be starving. Now, your leadership may not be something we approve of, but there's no reason for us to say, or to give the dictator the ability to say, the reason you're hungry and sick is that the U.S. won't sell you these things. So I just say to you that tune in, maybe C-SPAN at 11 o'clock, that'd be 10 o'clock Central Time, on Wednesday morning. We're going to have a vote on the Agricultural Appropriations Bill, and we have renovated the protocols or the regulations for imposing embargoes. These embargo guns backfire. And we end up with more burn and powder on us than we do on the people that are our targets. And it's time for us to say, to let the value and virtue of the American people be known, at least as it's related to food and medicine.
Governor Carnahan, embargoes as a weapon in foreign policy.
Well, I agree with the senator that it's time for us to revisit the food and medicine embargo with Cuba, and I think it's appropriate that we go ahead. And I am a big advocate of Missouri agriculture. I've gone on trade missions with people in agriculture around the world to open up markets, and we do compete well. But we have more than we need, and it's one of those things where we can have the productivity of our state go up by selling those products. And so I would welcome the opportunity to sell food and medicine products to Cuba.
Roger, your reaction to what you heard? Anything more?
I'm actually in complete agreement.
Let me ask you about other foreign policy issues, though, and we'll go to Senator Ashcroft first. Obviously, there's a great deal of turmoil in the Middle East. There's some discussion of continuing trade embargoes in that area. What should this country's position be on the problems there, and how can we proceed in your
Is this the 30 or a 90?
This is the 30, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, the situation in the Middle East is extremely tense. I called Ambassador Ivry at the Israeli embassy in Washington just a day ago to confer with him about the situation. And frankly, we need to do whatever we can. I commend the president for calling the parties together at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt in order to cease the violence, to at least stop the violence and see if we can reacquire some of the goodwill that's necessary to start talking. It's an important part of the world. Israel is the best ally we have virtually in the world, our only democratic ally. We need to stand with them, and we need to find a way to avoid very serious bloodshed there.
Governor, I know this isn't a lot of time, but 30 seconds to talk about the Middle East.
Well, I commend the president on getting involved, because we need the strongest nation in the world needs to be working in that area to get the people to put out the fires and to stem the violence and get back to the peace process that we had been sponsoring. And so it's very important that we move forward on that. Of course, our hearts go out to the sailors who were killed on the USS Cone. That is something where we have to find who did that, and we have to respond very vigorously.
Thank you, gentlemen. Nick?
Our next question comes from Beth Dale, who is a full-time student at the University of Missouri, Kansas City.
Okay, my question is, in November, whoever's elected president, in their term of office, they will have the opportunity to nominate either 1 to 3 Supreme Court justices. And as a senator, it's your job to approve these nominees. Now, would their stance on abortion affect the way you would vote for their approval?
Governor Carnahan.
Yes, that's a very important aspect of this presidential election, and also who is in the Senate will affect that as well, because there's a confirmation process for judges on the Supreme Court. I would not have a litmus test for who would go on the Supreme Court, but I've heard my opponents say the same thing. But he also talks about the fact that there had to be strict construction of the Constitution. And I think he is by code word saying that indeed he would be appointing justices like Scalia. And I think that he really does want some justices that would change the Constitution and the way it's interpreted. I believe there is a right to choose for a woman in the Constitution. And I would hope that that would remain there. And I think my opponent is very much wanting to take that down by referring to appointing justices and approving justices like Anton Scalia and Clarence Thomas.
Senator Ashcroft.
Well, you're right about the fact that Supreme Court is a very important thing, and I think it's a minimum of 1 to 3. We could have even more than that, but it's hard to think that it's possible that the next president, and of course, presidents frequently go for 2 terms, so it's a very important decision. I appreciate the question. And there's an extent to which Governor Carnahan has described my position. I don't have a litmus test on specific issues, but I want people who respect the Constitution. And you see, I don't believe that the Constitution is to be amended anytime 5 guys on the Supreme Court, and I say guys generically, women or men together, get in their black robes and walk into the back room. I think there is a provision in the Constitution that says how we amend it. And so I don't want judges who are legislators. I want judges who are judicial and who interpret the Constitution but don't amend it, who interpret the laws but don't amend the laws. And I think that's very important. My own view is that we ought to have the ability to amend the Constitution as a people. That's what the Constitution itself provides. But the idea somehow that judges are authorized on our behalf in a mini legislature where 5 people control and there's no veto by the president and no ability for anyone to challenge that, to change our laws instead of interpret our laws, that's an idea whose time has passed. It's time for us to be focused on an interpretation of the Constitution with respect.
Governor Carnahan.
Well, I think that the answer that you just received is a pretty good indication that, in fact, the senator wants judges who will amend the Constitution by making a different decision than Roe versus Wade. And I don't think that's the proper approach. I think we ought to let the Constitution be a living document. It is interpreted. It has been interpreted by the court. And I want jurists who understand their place on the Supreme Court and what we really need in our Constitution.
Senator Ashcroft.
This is a really clear difference between us. Because once you say to the judges, this is a living document, just let it grow anywhere you want to let it grow. You're the tender of the ivy here. So if you want to train it over this way to favor some people or train it over that way to favor other people, you're free to do so. The Constitution is elastic, it's stretchable, it's living, just do what you want. I reject that notion. I think the American people are intelligent enough to be guardians of the rights that they approve of, and that they don't have to be told by 5 people that the Constitution can be amended by the people, but not by 5 people who are in charge of changing the fundamental structure of American government. Not.
Senator Ashcroft, thank you. Unfortunately, it is on that difference of opinion on issues that we have to close our conversation. I very much appreciate Governor Carnahan and Senator Ashcroft, your civility in this program tonight.
Go ahead and applaud. Very nicely done.
to our citizens for asking such great questions tonight. If you can still hear us, I'm Nick Haynes of KCPT.
I'm Dave Helling. Vote. See you later.
Good night.
Thank you.